and thank you all for joining us. I'm joined by Mayor Brandon Scott and my Deputy Commissioner, Cherie Briscoe. Yesterday, officers were dispatched to the 500 block of Coventry Road to investigate a reported death on arrival inside of an apartment. When officers arrived on the scene, they discovered the bodies of 2 juvenile victims who were both in a state of decomposition with obvious visible trauma. Our homicide detectives are currently working with the medical examiner's office to determine the exact cause of death and the exact time of death. Both victims have been identified as 6-year-old Jamerra Thomas and her brother, 8-year-old Davin Thomas. My heart goes out to the family members, and on behalf of the Baltimore Police Department, we send our condolences and our heartfelt prayers. Now, while our investigators are always working under very challenging circumstances, there is nothing more difficult than investigating the murder of a child, much less 2 children. And while this investigation is still very early on, we can confirm now that the mother, 28-year-old Jamerra Hall, is the suspect in this case, having confessed to murdering her children. She is currently in our custody, and detectives will be pursuing criminal charges. We're still reviewing surveillance video, combing through calls for service, and speaking with residents and gathering any additional details around this heartbreaking incident. At this time, I will turn it over to our mayor to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. This is a unfathomable, gut-wrenching tragedy. And my entire heart and prayers go out to the family, the community, and really the entire city. School starts on Monday. Davin and Jamerra, as you hear, who are 6 and 8, should be starting school like the rest of the kids in the city. And if you have children, or if you don't have children, think a niece or a nephew or a little cousin or just your neighbor's kid, and take a moment really to reminisce what it was like to be 6 or 8 years old and the excitement of a new school year, let alone a new school year after you haven't been in school in over a year. Davin and Jamerra should be making new friends. They should be showing off their new school shoes. They should be really starting to grow into who they are as a person, inching closer and closer to their full potential. And we should be celebrating their promise. But instead, we are here today talking about their unfortunate death. And I'll be honest, I didn't sleep much last night. When you think about a tragedy like this, you think about having all that's right in the world. Young people, energy, their voices, their laughter being snuffed out in a moment. And for something that could have and should have been avoided. You hear me always say that Baltimore's greatest asset is our young people, and efforts to allow them to grow into the best version of themselves and to truly take our city to be better than we ever have been starts with preserving that promise that they have, starts with investing in that promise that they have. And this is why our administration, my administration, is working to tirelessly approach violence, thinking about the complete and comprehensive approach to it. I can assure you that as we work to develop the most robust child fatality review process in the country, the tragic deaths of these 2 beautiful young people will be carefully and very thoroughly reviewed. We have to and we will close any gap that enables tragedies like this to occur. This wasn't drug-related. This wasn't violent groups, or this wasn't, or where we had some random thing. And while we don't know the details of the case, we know that 2 children are gone. We know that a family is dealing with a traumatic situation that no one can even imagine. We know that a community is dealing with a traumatic situation that no one can even stomach. And a city, again, is faced with an unthinkable traumatic incident. And it's because of incidents like this and others that we've had, unfortunately, that you hear me, and why my entire administration is working and focused on reducing trauma in our city. And because we know that the ills of our society are tied together, I will continue to push for our young people to get all the support and resources that they deserve. But this cannot go on, and it cannot and will not be our normal. For both Davin and Jamerra and their old friends, those students who are going to come back to school and be looking for them, who are going to have to be consoled by teachers and grief counselors, their teachers who are going to have to be consoled about students that they remember having all this energy. For all of them, we have to be better. We owe it to them to be better. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so, as I mentioned, we are still very early into this investigation. We will be looking into Ms. Hall's background and working with Child Protective Services in reference to this case. And lastly, let me thank my captain, assistant commander in the Homicide Division, Captain Edwards, and all of his detectives who worked tirelessly around the clock on this, officers, detectives out in the field who supported this homicide investigation. Let me say thank you to all of you who worked really hard around the clock to make sure we close this case within 24 hours. We'll take a few questions.
Commissioner, you said she confessed. Could you tell us why and how she did it?
Well, no, I can't tell you how and why she did it. What I can tell you is that our detectives worked really, really hard to locate her. And once she was located, she was brought in for questioning. Detectives did a phenomenal job and was able to extract a confession from her that she's responsible for the death of her two children. We won't go into the how and the why. That's still being investigated, and detectives are still looking through a lot of evidence, but it's still an open investigation.
Can you tell us the timeline between when officers arrived, found the children, and then the actual arrest and where she may have been found?
So the call came in yesterday afternoon, call of a foul odor. Officers responded to the location. Once inside, located two victims, one in the front room, one in the bathroom. And so it was at that point children were found when officers arrived and were able to enter the residence. It wasn't until, I believe, this morning, if I'm correct, the mother was located and brought in for questioning.
Commissioner, I know you're going to a lot of issues in the sense of what you can reveal, not reveal, and move past that part of it. And I know the mayor, maybe it's a question for the mayor about all of the departments talking together. If this was a mental illness problem, if this was an abusive problem, which necessarily wouldn't come under the police department, but another agency. And I know you can't speak maybe because of just whatever. But this is not somebody on the corner shooting at each other and a kid caught in the crossfire.
That is correct. And to your previous point, there is communication between interagency cooperation and communication within city government, and there is communication with agencies outside of city government. However, we're looking into Ms. Hall's history to find out what happened in her history that could have led up to this. And those are questions that we ask during the investigation. Certainly, we would love for a world where there's so much communication we can know in advance, but we don't live in that world. So yes, it's incumbent upon us to communicate, coordinate within city government and with other agencies in other jurisdictions.
And I'll just add, Pete, that this is why we restarted the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. We had our first meeting last week because we know that there has been a gap in communication and working together to develop solutions to problems that we're consistently seeing. And that's why we're going to be pushing to make sure that that group stays more active this time. We had a very, very successful first meeting and how we're going to work together and share information, but really, it's really about doing the work of solving the issues that many of us have seen in the disconnect between not just city agencies, state agencies, federal, and everyone was at the table last week, and that's a start, but it's a significant thing for us because that has not happened in over 3 years without having that body meeting.
But you also have commented on people just talking to each other, family, teachers. You know, the kids came to school and had marks on them, or to communicate that with somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys can't be everywhere.
And I think that, Ms. Pete, you and I have talked about that before. This is One of the reasons, when you think about that, right, this is why it's important for our young people to be in school learning, and why we need adults to do the right thing to keep our COVID numbers going the right way, so that we know that when young people are interacting with their teachers and all of these other folks, we're able to get information and get them resources, right? For some of our young people, we know when they come back to school next week, it's going to be about how they can get multiple meals a day. These are real things facing our young people, and we need adults to understand how their selfishness, it will prevent that from happening for our young people, and the importance of us having all of these caring, in our neighborhood, in my neighborhood, your neighborhood, they say it takes a village. These folks who work at their school, the folks who are in the cafeteria, their teachers, their counselors, the people that they see at the rec center, their coaches, the folks at the library, they're part of these young people's village. And that's what we have to continue to make sure that those resources are there and open to our young people, to make sure that we help as many young people as we humanly can.
Commissioner, I have a few questions here. How old is the little boy?
I want to say the little boy is Devin, I believe, is 8, and Denari is 6.
Okay, and were there any other kids in her home, in that home?
Those were the only 2 children found inside the residence.
Do we know if she has any other kids?
Don't have the answer to that now, but we can certainly get that to you.
And then I wanted to know who called yesterday.
Well, there was a call from a citizen about a foul odor.
Commissioner, I found an article from 2018 where this mother went missing with her children, possibly connected to an arson case. She has a case there from 2018 as well. Was there concern about her state then, and was anything done about it in terms of the children and any intervention?
We learned about that recently, that there was that case. They were found the next day at a hospital. And so they were reported missing then, but found the very next day. Now that we're investigating this, we learned about that. When you heard me say we're going to be looking into Ms. Hall's past, that's what I mean. We'll be looking into her past to ascertain if there was something that was done that led her to this, or something that wasn't done that perhaps led her to this. But it's all part of the investigation of the killing of the 2 children.
Do we know if the kids were in the system, DSS, as a result of that?
That's all part of the investigation that we're working to get the details for.
And that time around, you said they were found in the hospital, the children?
They were located at a hospital the very next day.
Okay, so was the mom there? Do we know if she dropped the kids off at the hospital?
The mom and children were together at the hospital the next day after all 3 were reported missing.
And you guys said there were visible signs of trauma to the body. Can you elaborate on that?
Just when you see children that are dead, that's a visible sign of trauma. Children were dead inside of the home. And so we then had to make sure, not only while we continue to professionally investigate, but make sure we offer resources to our officers to make sure that their health and wellness remains intact, so that they can appropriately investigate this without being more traumatized than normal, because that's not a normal thing to see. That's what I mean.
All right, we're gonna go to the Baltimore Sun. They haven't asked any questions yet. That'll be our last question.
Now, before, sorry, Alexa, to your point, when you hear me talk about the child fatality review, that's what we'll be doing. Of course, neither one of us were in charge at that particular time, but we'll be making sure that we're working with all our partners to see what was done and what wasn't done, so that as we move forward, that we make sure that things are put in place.
Commissioner, just real quick, do you know at this point, had officers ever been called to that apartment before?
What we found was that there had not been any recent calls to that apartment. I think while we were on the scene yesterday, we looked back 30 days, and there had not been any calls for police to that apartment.
And do you know, is there any information about like how long the children may have been missing or
To the best of our knowledge, they were seen last week, but it is still under investigation to determine, by the medical examiner, to determine actual time of death and how long they would have been there.
So it was her apartment, correct?
It was her apartment.
Did there appear to be AC running, or, I mean, when officers walked in, the state that we're questioning about of decomposition, time-wise, was there AC running or, I mean, the conditions of, can you comment on the conditions of the home?
It was, I was briefed while on the scene that there were early stages of decomposition.
Thank you, guys.
Can we get one last one to the mayor? Mr. Mayor, what's in place that you want people to know, the hospitals, the churches, to get help? If you have a problem with a kid, to drop it off, with no questions asked. What do you want people to know before it gets to this stage?
Well, we want everyone to know first that we have a Department of Social Services, DSS, is there to help. They want to help. They have a fabulous director who wants to help. They reach out and work with families very directly. We also want people to get help in many things that they need. This is why we have a Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. There are opportunities for folks to get help with their young people and for families, and we really desperately want everyone to get any help that they need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Lindsay, are you available?
I'll be right back. I'll be right back.